Charming fishing series Stupid Fox X Lonely Cold and Melancholy Great Demon King. Meng Cheng was bright and flamboyant when he was young, and he loved to play wildly. His pursuit of people was also vigorous, without any skills, it was all about emotions. Once, while someone was asleep, he was caught stealing a kiss. The little fox remained calm and stared at the boy's burning ears, coaxing him gently, "I took advantage of you, student he. To be fair, do you want to kiss him back?" Later on, it wasn't under the altar of the flower of jailing, it was a pathological demon revealing its claws and teeth. He imprisoned her in his arms, breathing fiercely and saying, "Meng Cheng, come with me to hell, you won't want to escape for the rest of your life." The world is unpredictable, and Meng Cheng's fate has become a mystery. Reunion was at a celebration banquet of a dark horse movie. The woman, dressed in a luxurious and delicate dress, was extremely cold and stunning. She caught the attention of the audience, her heart not in a field of fame and fortune, and her gaze cast far away at him. The clean and worn white shirt was replaced by a stylish and luxurious suit, and the man's demeanor was clear and reserved. He leapt into the position of the rising new rich with great power in the capital, and was respectfully welcomed into the main seat, ignoring her as if unaware. She thought there was no turning back between them. After the banquet was over, there was no one in the dark corridor, but the man firmly pushed her against the wall. His calm and restrained appearance was lost, and he bit and kissed in the wild. His eyes were bloodshot and almost crazy. "For 5 years, you just want to kill me." He lowered his head and buried it in her neck, dejected and self-deprecating. "Meng Cheng, remember clearly that I can't do without you." Meng Cheng's eyes were burning, and it turned out that the punishment she had imposed on her over the years was actually on him. Fortunately, a lifetime is still a lifetime, and he did not lead her into hell. He held her hand and walked towards the light. Bidirectional redemption, SC, he keywords of the novel. Chen Yushi has no pop-ups, Chen Yushi downloads the complete collection of her TXT, and Chen Yushi reads her latest chapters. Chapter 1. Xuexue. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Xuexue, you lit a fire in my world full of withered grass, and the flames roared with the wind. I saw your eyes in the absurd black abyss, and after that, the night was over and the sky was bright. The demon occupies a dark corner, and under the light, the girl looks like a supreme deity, humbly watching. He wouldn't think that one day the girl will turn around, her gaze and love will only come for him. From then on, the demon became a believer, and he Liang Qi lived this life, only serving under Meng Cheng. Near Beiheruihua School, there is a bustling market, and in a private room at the end of the second floor of a restaurant on the street, there is a lot of noise coming from the noisy area. The room is spacious and bright, and it can be seen that it has been carefully decorated. In the middle of one wall, there is a champagne decoration with "Happy Birthday," and next to it are some beautiful colored balloons and pull-up lights. At the top, there was a banner hanging straight, with a red background and white words for birthday wishes that were abrupt and eye-catching. Wishing Sister Cheng a happy birthday, no more repeating grades every year, and no shortage of men every year. Oh yeah. On the round table of the yellow pear-wood turntable, there is a scene of being swept away by wind and clouds after a meal, scattered with several boxes of cigarettes and plastic lighters, various snacks and fruits, and beer and beverage bottles scattered everywhere. The 3-layer cream cake was everywhere in Huahua's mouth, and he didn't even take a bite into Meng Cheng's mouth. It was all used by the others to fight cake battles. At this moment, even after eating and drinking, a group of male and female students gathered together in a noisy manner to play dice, chatting, as if their energy could never be exhausted. Xiang Zhao and Gao Wenba stood in the middle, and their words and phrases were paired like cross-talk, making others laugh incessantly. The topic took turns, and not long after the start of school, I don't know who started talking about new classmates in the new class. There was a bit of noise in the private room, and a name flickered vaguely in his ear, but Meng Cheng couldn't hear it clearly. I didn't know her after hearing it clearly, because she had never been to school again except for the start of the school year report. I think I have won many victories and failed many times in social intercourse with someone. I can talk to him when Lao Tai sits next to me about depression. From then on, I only have love and brightness in my heart. But for a week, I have become familiar with teachers in all subjects. Healing is a modal particle and didn't give me any handouts. Ing. Gao Wenbo continued with a humorous expression, it's not that I'm telling you. That guy's face is so cold. It's not an exaggeration to say that if I pour a bottle of yogurt on his face and scoop it twice with a shovel, a frozen stir-fried yogurt will be freshly cooked. It's like a walking stir-fried yogurt machine. Meng Cheng lazily and comfortably sank into the sofa, his long legs slightly bent as he stepped on the table. His exposed skin shone with a snowy luster under the light, and he raised his hand handsome and shook the dice goo a few times before slapping it on the table. Her cold and beautiful eyebrows and eyes slightly raised, and she smiled slowly and said, "Who taught you to use metaphors like this?" It's not surprising, his father is a physical education teacher who has been tutoring him in Chinese since he was young. Xiang Zhao chuckled as he spoke and shook the dice, with a strong Taoist-like attitude. As soon as the points opened, Meng Cheng lost. A group of people around her started cheering, and she planned to drink. However, Xiang Zhaotian stopped her and said, "Cheng Jia, drinking is so boring. Do you dare to play a big game?" "What dare I, Meng Cheng, not dare to do?" Meng Cheng thought for a second and realized that there was really something missing, so he added rigorously, "Besides studying." Everyone burst into laughter and curiously urged Meng Cheng to explain. Meng Cheng himself seemed indifferent and lazy, waiting for him to come up with some ideas. "My handsome hot face has been sticking to my classmates' cold buttocks for a week now, and I feel very frustrated. Sister, you can go and meet him." Xiang Zhao felt depressed for the only mistake on his social resume and said, "It would be best if he could kneel down under your pomegranate skirt." And then he threw him hard again. Gao Wenbo guessed based on the direction of the Dog Blood TV drama. Xiang Zhaoxiang was instantly connected to the Ren and Du meridians by someone, and was enlightened. He suddenly said, "Yes. That's right. That's it. Meng Cheng. How old are you two? I can't even watch this trick in kindergarten." She was childish and bored, and couldn't help but sneer. After 2 seconds, she laughed again, "Besides, what am I trying to figure out?" The warmth on his cold buttocks. Meng Cheng leaned affectionately against a good-looking girl next to her. Song Xian was willing to listen to them, and after finishing her makeup, she interjected, "Yeah, I'll show you some virtue." "So what?" "Classmate, they just have a cold and aloof personality. Who wants you to rush to attract trouble?" Xiang Zhao's cheeks were bulging, but because he couldn't resist Song's wishes, he had to ignore her words and answer Meng Cheng's question. "Picture his beauty. He is so handsome." As he spoke, he slammed Gao Wenbo on the shoulder and sought an alliance, saying, "Bo, do you think so?" Gao Wenbo nodded seriously and agreed. Yes, a glance can make people cry and shed colorful tears longer than Lanzhou Lamian noodles. Puff. Are you making a Hollywood fantasy movie? Everyone couldn't help but laugh at his magical description, and Meng Cheng's eyes curved a soft curve. His charming and gorgeous face had a bright smile. "Oh, come on, I know you have culture. Put away your Chinese talent and put it in your pocket." Xiang Zhao still insisted, "Sister Cheng, are you really not planning to give it a try? Melting an iceberg can be quite challenging. What are you trying?" She didn't even remember the name. Meng Cheng shook his head and said lightly, "I'm not interested." After speaking, he drank half a glass of beer with a refreshing swipe, which was considered a punishment for losing. There were at least a dozen people on the scene. The circle was different. No one had been paying attention to the handsome student he who could make people flow to Lamian noodles in Lanzhou. The topic quickly jumped over and the noise remained. Meng Cheng's impression of this episode also passed by quickly. She never cared about irrelevant matters, so she felt carefree and relaxed. As a birthday star, she played a few games with her friends and got up. She said to Xuexue, who was drinking beer as plain water next to her, "You guys play first, I'll go to the restroom." Xuexue compared it to, "Okay." After coming out of the restroom, Meng Cheng didn't go back. She crossed the private room to the semi-curved outdoor platform at the end of the corridor and lit a cigarette. She occasionally smoked, but mostly some low-concentration, fruity, and fragrant women's cigarettes. The light breeze carried the unique hot and sticky feeling of summer nights, blending with the various fragrances of oil-grilled snacks on the street below. Meng Cheng's slender porcelain white arms draped over the cold iron railing, his thick and shiny black hair curled up slightly, falling down to his waist like seaweed. The hair on both sides of his cheeks was blown back by the wind. The slender cigarette butt and starry flames between her fingers were extinguished, and she only took a few puffs. The mist shrouded in mist and spewed out from her lips, blurring her eyes. In an instant it was scattered by the wind and disappeared without a trace. The night is thick, there are no stars tonight, only a crescent moon like a light boat, hanging alone in the pitch-black sky, haloing with the bright and faint moonlight. The more lively the fireworks in the mortal world below, the colder the moon in this sky makes people feel. The sound of joy faintly spread from the private room, further highlighting the silence of no one in the corridor. Meng Cheng looked up and looked at the lonely and distant crescent moon, pulling himself out of the group of laughter and joy. At this moment, his stuffy mood reached its peak. The moon is not round, life is sad. Just like today every year, it's her birthday and also her mother's death day. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Love at First Sight. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Love at First Sight. The bright lights in the corridor and the thick night outside the balcony, Meng Cheng stood at the intersection of light and darkness, like a painting. At the right age, she exuded a fresh and lively youthful vibe, but she didn't show any of the typical student-like qualities. The body is a bit too thin, but the figure is very good. The waist is thin, the legs are long, the front and back are uneven, the lines are superior, slender and graceful, ignoring the eyes of others, wearing cool and bold clothes. These beautiful traits of young girls are even more evident. Light-colored denim shorts with broken edges, white cotton tight and navel-exposed suspender, and a semi-transparent thin chiffon shirt on the outside. One side was loose and peeled off, and she was too lazy to manage it. She revealed half a smooth and fair fragrant shoulder, and the deep concave collarbone was exquisite and beautiful. Meng Cheng is very beautiful, and many people label her face as fox-like, like her mother, but undoubtedly, no one has ever denied their beauty. The contour is three-dimensional, the facial features are exquisite, and there is no need to add makeup. Black hair, snowy skin, and red lips are beautiful and charming, and this characteristic is extremely aggressive. The highlight is reflected in her fox eyes, which are curled up and raised. Her eyelashes are fine and long, and her pupils are as dark and rich as sparkling obsidian. A small tear mole adorns the bottom of her right eye, adding a touch of charm to her charm, as if she can capture the soul at a glance, captivating her mind. This appearance is inherently controversial and polarized. Some people are willing to be impressed by her poppy beauty, while others have great prejudices and dislikes towards her just based on her face. However, Meng Cheng has always had this bold and independent personality since she was young. Even if someone else's saliva sprayed into the ocean, not a single drop would splash onto her. Sister Cheng. Someone shouted behind him, and Meng Cheng withdrew his gaze from the moon and turned his gaze back. Tears welled up in my eyes as I was caught off guard. Xiang Zhao was still wearing a broom star with a raised hairstyle made of cake cream on her head. She walked over and grabbed her hand, while her eyes squeezed and tears streamed down her cheeks. Seeing his appearance, Meng Cheng's trembling voice was so frightened that he couldn't help but laugh and cry, "What are you doing?" Xiang Zhao lifted his arm and casually wiped away the tears on his face, sobbing, "Sister, I was crying because of your back." Meng Cheng. "Get out of here," he said, shaking off this two-cornered hand. Gao Wenba and Song Sini came out and just saw this scene, they laughed to death. Xiang Zhao has had a drink tonight, and now he may be getting drunk. His reaction is slow and a bit dull. Song Xian is willing to play with him like a pet. Gao Wenba approached Meng Cheng and casually leaned against the railing, "Are you going to school tomorrow?" Meng Cheng crushed out his cigarettes and said lazily, "Go ahead, if I don't go to school, old Mengda will cut me into Daoshao noodles." "You can't bear it, Uncle Meng." Gao Wenba recalled the past and thought about it with tears in his eyes. From childhood to adulthood, the three of us caused trouble together. Every time Xiang Zhao and I were beaten up by mixed doubles, we couldn't get off the bed. You were the mastermind and came to visit us with snacks every time. Childhood anecdotes surfaced before Meng Cheng's eyes, and he smiled. Old Meng doted on her without restraint, and basically didn't make her frown. However, she persisted in going to school. She knew her brain and morals best, and was not the material for learning at all. However, her own father didn't believe it. The key to entering 6th grade and 3rd year of junior high school was to let her stay at the first level for 2 years. So far, I have only reached this level in the sea of learning. Xiang Zhao and Zhou Wenba have been her 2 junior students since childhood and have been in the same class with her ever since. It has been a week since the start of school, and Meng Cheng went to school with respect on the same day. Then, because she stayed up all night the night before yesterday, she casually found a table and fell asleep unconscious. As soon as the bell rang, she left, and even the reporting and other procedures were completed by 2 unscrupulous young boys on her behalf. Song Xining and Xiang Zhao were playing around in the corridor, laughing uncontrollably. Gao Wenba also kept chatting with Meng Cheng. In fact, all 3 of them have a number. They know that Meng Cheng, because of his mother, feels uncomfortable and depressed every year on his birthday, and doesn't show as much happiness as he does. Meng Cheng laughed as he watched the elementary school chicken play around and occasionally replied to Gao Wenba's words, only appearing slightly absent-minded. She raised her hand and pulled the broken hair around her face behind her ear, with every frown and smile pleasing to the eye. Her youthful charm was bright and refined, like a luxurious and lazy white jade spirit sparrow. After a while, Meng Cheng patted Gao Wenba's shoulder and said, "Xiang Zhao has drunk too much, don't let him run around." After speaking, walk towards the staircase. "Why are you going?" "I suddenly feel like eating stir-fried yogurt." Stir-fried yogurt. Bring me one too. Mango-flavored. Song Xining added at the end. Meng Cheng raised his hand, indicating that he knew. Gao Wenba dragged Xiang Zhao back to the private room, while Song Sini walked to the small terrace, leaned on the railing, and looked down at the snack street below. He found a small stall selling stir-fried yogurt. This snack street is very famous near Ruehua. Usually, many students come in groups of 3. At the peak of noon and evening, the crowded road cannot be walked. Just next to this restaurant, just take a turn when you come out. Meng Cheng glanced at his phone and found that old Meng had sent her a message 10 minutes ago asking if the dinner had ended. The crowd was bustling like water, and she walked diagonally through the half-width and not narrow street towards the location of the stir-fried yogurt stall. She lowered her head and knocked on her phone to reply to Lao Meng's message, not paying much attention to the road. In the middle of the road, suddenly, a few hurried tram bells rang in my ear. Meng Cheng instinctively raised her head in response to the sound, and the few people in front of her screamed and panicked as she dodged. The white searchlight in front of the car suddenly pierced her at close range, causing her to frown and squint her eyes, feeling slightly startled but unable to react in time to avoid it. As she was about to collide with the tram, suddenly her wrist was tightly grasped by someone. Then, she was pulled aside by a strong force. The next second, a dull pain came from her shoulders, and Meng Cheng leaned slightly to her side, falling into a wide and hard embrace. The car narrowly brushed past and continued to charge forward on the street. Someone complained, "What kind of quality? I don't know how to slow down in crowded places, I can honk the horn and not brake." A few seconds later, crowded people resumed coming and going around. The person in front of her was holding a small bag of barbecue, and the tender aroma of cumin slowly drifted up. However, at this moment, Meng Cheng's breath became clearer, and what was even clearer was the clean soap horn fragrance on his body, like the bitter citrus that she loved very much. She lifted her head and a stunning face caught her eye. In an instant, I held my breath and couldn't make a sound when I said thank you to my mouth. The movement of retreating also froze. The heartbeat seemed to suddenly stop for a moment, and then when it started beating again, it accelerated and pounded. Meng Cheng didn't know how to describe it, but he always remembered that moment of feeling. It was like in the scorching heat, where his fingertips pressed hard and opened the soda can with a crackle. The bubbles of summer soda rushed out, making a sizzling sound of dissolution against the can wall, refreshing and refreshing. Using Gao Wenba's metaphorical skills, she is probably like a bottle of Sprite now. Shit, it's his mother handsome. Accurately handsome to her heart. The boy is particularly tall and slender, with a slender and not weak physique, appearing as handsome as pine and bamboo. His back is straight, and she rubbed several creases on his washed but ironed white shirt. The lights on both sides of the street reflected on his handsome face, casting a shadow on it. The interplay of light and shadow outlined the contours of his features, making them even thinner and more profound. His fine and fluffy black hair was draped over his forehead, and Meng Cheng stood straight in front of the young man's eyes. His phoenix eyes were narrow, cold, and sharp, with thin and sharp curved lines. At the end, they lifted slightly upwards, leaving a shallow mark on his double eyelids. The drooping eyelashes were long and straight, and there was no emotion in the pupils below. They were dull and faint, as if a thin layer of ice had frozen and isolated the outside world. Although the distance between them was so close, the gaze he cast made people feel empty and distant. "Look at the road." He frowned slightly and his voice was cold. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Dangerous Vortex. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Dangerous Vortex. The young man spoke out, and Meng Cheng regained her senses. Her eyes were fixed on the other person, looking sour. She remembered and blinked twice before swallowing saliva inexplicably. She opened her mouth and said, "Thank you. Thank you." The eyebrows and eyes of He Liang and Qi Qingjun were a lifeless silence, wrapped in a cold and indifferent tone. After a long silence, she did not see any movement. As her Adam's apple floated slightly up and down, a low voice sounded, "Can you get up from me?" Meng Cheng. She seemed to have already stood firm just now, and I don't know when she leaned back into his arms. Sure enough, I know her best about my own body. As soon as she stood up, He Liang didn't pause for half a second and turned away, leaving only Meng Cheng with a cold and lonely straight back, gradually drifting away in the crowd. She stood there in a daze, feeling like a raging tsunami was erupting in her heart. It was earth-shattering, and everything was stirred up in a mess, with a faint sense of dizziness rising from her feet. Meng Cheng. Song Sini's volume pierced through the crowd, her hair astonishing and dyed golden. When she hurried over, she looked like a golden-haired mother lion king. Didn't she hit anywhere, did she? She looked through the entire scene on the second floor of the restaurant and knew that a boy had just pulled her in time. However, she still circled around Meng Cheng to confirm that she was not injured, and finally breathed a sigh of relief, noticing her appearance as if her soul had gone out of her body. He waved his hand in front of her and said, "Hey." Meng Cheng did not respond. "What's going on? Are you scared or have you gone to hell?" Meng Cheng shook off his paws that were waving wildly in front of him, and regained his thoughts that had been seduced by beauty. "I'm not seeing a ghost, I've seen my future boyfriend," he said. Song Sini was stunned for 3 seconds, then said, "Lie down and make a fool of yourself." His chin fell to the ground. "Aren't you interested in that man just now?" The view upstairs was high, and she didn't see the boy's face, but even if he was handsome, she couldn't help but think to herself, roast. Your love at first sight is really a vulgar and careless way to open it. Meng Cheng. However, Song Xinyuan was also very curious. After all, it was Meng Cheng's first time touching the mortal heart, and he still fell in love at first glance. "Do you need your contact information?" "Ah. Not really." Meng Cheng was taken aback for a moment, obviously not very familiar with the chat-up process. "The first time I was tempted, I wasn't very proficient." Song Xuexue wished that iron would not turn into steel. "So, may I ask, in this vast city of Beha and the vast sea of people, where are you going to find your crush?" "The beginning and the end." Meng Cheng remained silent and didn't reply. He just stared at the direction the boy was leaving for a moment. The street was bustling with noise, and the problem of Song Xue's wish mixed in with all the noise in his ears, disappearing together. She remembered that the temperature in his palm was a bit cold, but now the skin on the wrist he had held was scorching hot. After a while, Meng Cheng raised his hand and pressed his palm against his left chest, feeling the explosive pulsation as if he was about to break through his chest at any cost in the next moment. This passionate and surging throb spread throughout his body through his heart, shouting a certain signal to her. Unprecedented, very unfamiliar, and also very magical. She curved her eyes, her bright eyes shining brightly, and a bright smile. A heart-pounding frenzy, she thought, she had received the best birthday gift. He Liangqi lives in an old alley area, not far from the snack street, but it is remote and quiet, dark and inconspicuous, forgotten in a narrow corner of the neon lights. He and his mother are hidden here. The house is an old bungalow, not too dilapidated, at least several times better than the various underground warehouses, abandoned station buildings, and bridge bottoms they have lived in before. He Liangqi pushed the door in and saw Su Huilan trying to hang clothes in the front yard. She got half of her body off the wheelchair, holding a clothes rack with one hand and reaching for the clothes that had fallen on the ground with the other. She was struggling to support herself with only one leg, trembling and at risk of falling. The young man frowned and strode over, with a hint of reproach in his calm tone. "Didn't he say to wait for me to come back and do it?" He helped her sit in the wheelchair, picked up her clothes, and took the hanger from her hand. "Just a few clothes, don't you think I'm hanging them properly?" Su Huilan pointed to the 2 clothes hanging on the clothesline, with a gentle and peaceful expression and a graceful demeanor. However, her emaciated face has gone through vicissitudes and has an indelible weariness. She is very happy because she did a small thing well. He Liangqi pushed her back into the room, took out the barbecue and spread it out on the table. With a stiff attitude, he said, "You don't need to come." Su Huilan looked at her stubborn son in front of her and silently sighed. She didn't know at which stage she had started, but she became increasingly aloof and indifferent. She tightly covered herself up and remained silent, only answering questions. "I feel a strong sense of guilt in my heart. I want to make up for it, but I don't know where to start." "You have finally returned to your studies and got back on track. You are already a few years behind others. This is what your mother owes you for delaying." Her expression dimmed for a moment, and she quickly adjusted. "Your studies are important, how can you handle all the big and small things? You don't owe me anything, don't say such things again." He Liangqi lowered his eyebrows and eyes, with the light bulb burning and emitting a bright light. His long eyelashes, like a feather fan, cast a slanted shadow in front of him. He was not used to staring at people, or rather repelled and disliked them, including Xuexue. Quiet for a few seconds, he didn't continue the topic and stared at the barbecue on the table. "It's not delicious when it's cold," he said, continuing on. "It is inevitable to evoke various unpleasant memories of the past, and the frustration is hard to dispel." Xuexue also didn't mention it and picked up a skewer of meat and handed it to him. "The taste is quite good, do you want to try it too? There aren't many residents around here. They have just moved in, and their neighbors can't help but move around." Xuexue has difficulty moving, but her neighbor Aunt Zhang is enthusiastic. Last time she brought a few grilled skewers, she tasted them well and specifically asked where she bought them. Today was the night when she suddenly became greedy, and Liangqi went out to buy it for her. "You can eat it." Liangqi turned around and went to the courtyard to hang the remaining 2 clothes, then tied the door. "I'm back in the room. By the way, there's something I've been forgetting to ask you about," Xuexue called out to him. "I was idle cleaning that day when I saw a bracelet in the drawer of your room, which was packed in a wooden box and looked quite valuable. She has no other intention, she is just puzzled and curious." Liangqi still had no expression on his face, but a small ripple appeared in his dull and silent eyes. His thumb, which was hanging on his side, pressed tightly against his index finger joint, and then his crimson thin lips pursed, explaining in a low voice, "I swept it out from under the bed." "Oh. That should have been left by the original owner of the house." Liang returned to his room late and closed the door. The room is not big or small, with potholes and damages on the earthen walls. It is covered in old brown newspapers with blurred content, and the corners of the ceiling are covered in mottled stains left by leaking rain and drying up. The layout is crude and simple, but it wins over being clean and tidy, with a strong sense of cleanliness and obsessive-compulsive disorder. The boy sat down at the bedside, frowning and staring blankly, his eyes blank, unsure of what he was thinking. For a long time, he opened the cabinet under the table next to him and stared at the neatly arranged items inside, blinking slowly and warmly. "I have never been passive." Reaching in, I took out a cold and weighty silver folding knife from the innermost part and held it in my hand. Opening the knife, the sharp blade emitted a snowy and oppressive cold light in the unlit room, flashing across his face. Liangqi stared at the sharp blade, his pupils slowly losing focus, as if being attracted step by step and falling into some unknown dangerous vortex, as if this moment was still silent and calm, and the next second could be engulfed by bright red. The blade was icy cold, but his body temperature seemed to be even lower. He pressed against his wrist, slid towards the palm of his hand, and then lightly exerted force on his fingertips, causing his fair skin to break open and blood droplets to seep out. The blood was hot, which gave him a hint of clarity and brought him back to his senses. Suddenly, the door was slammed. Xuexue's soft voice leaked through the crack in the door. "Cold and late." End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Foot Chains. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Foot Chains. As if his self-hypnotic thoughts were suddenly pulled back, his dilated pupils returned to normal. Before the door handle turned, Liangqi stuffed a small knife under his pillow and got up to open the door. "It's so dark, why don't you turn on the lights?" Xuexue glanced inside, and the young man's tall figure subconsciously shifted slightly, blocking her gaze. "We're going to sleep soon," she said. "Oh, I've heated up a glass of milk for you." Sensing his aversion, Xuexue smiled in a relaxed tone and said, "You don't need to prepare breakfast for me tomorrow. There's something for sale at the entrance of the alley. The wheelchair that your father changed for me is fully automatic, and the home is also very convenient for me to move around. I can buy it myself." He said the caregiver has already been identified and should be able to come to work tomorrow. "My trivial matters won't take up your time, otherwise you always have to rush to school and being late will leave a bad impression on the teacher." In the future, you should focus on your studies. Mom remembers that you studied well before and seem to have received many awards. Yes, many awards, but Liang-chi vividly remembers that at that time, he joyfully held the certificate and full score test paper in front of her, hoping to make her happy and proud of himself, but his mother, who was always depressed, refused to take another look. After many attempts, the result was that the certificate and test paper were torn and discarded like waste paper, and she screamed, "What's the use of taking these exams? Can you find your dad? Can he see it?" Unlike her negative and unhappy demeanor at that time, Su Huilan now has a gentle expression, even exuding a sense of happiness, satisfied with her family of 3. "When you get into a good university, Dad will be very happy and proud of you," she said after she thought about it. Little did she know that Liang-chi heard the term "dad" coming out of her mouth so ordinary and warm. In an instant, her temples tightened, and her mind buzzed, as if a meridian had been cut, causing immense pain. It's like this again. Seemingly considering and planning for him, it's all about counting that person's goodness and caring about their feelings. Infiltrating everywhere, forcing him to accept everything. Liang-chi closed his eyes and said, "Mom." The young man's face was mostly shrouded in the shadow of the door frame, and his expression couldn't be seen clearly. His fingers were pressed against the edges of his pants, and the warm and slightly sticky liquid rubbed against the dark fabric. He swallowed his throat a few times with difficulty before finally asking, "Are you really planning to stay at Beha and not leave?" Su Huilan's face suddenly froze. After a while, she lowered her head and whispered, "Where else can we go? Isn't the ups and downs of the past few years enough? It's not easy to stabilize." Liang-chi suddenly interrupted in a voice, "Even if we now know that he has his own complete family, even if..." Cool late. Su Huilan lost her color. "Even if my existence is seen as equally filthy and unbearable as sin, pricked by the words of the world, and nailed to the pillar of shame with countless cuts and cuts, life is not as good as death, does it matter?" Su Huilan may not love him at all. From beginning to end, he was just a derivative item, and his only value was to become an emotional bond between her and that person, a tool for her to return to that person's side. As soon as the idea came out, it swept through my mind like a storm, just like a rainstorm that broke up rootless duckweeds. People trapped in the middle of the sea lost their only driftwood and allowed themselves to drown and suffocate. Liang-chi lowered his eyes and looked at the milk in her hand. He used to need and crave, but was so extravagant that he didn't deserve to drink. Now he doesn't need it anymore. "Mom, rest early." The door was closed. After a long period of silence, the wheelchair left and the lights outside went out. The darkness was even darker, and this was Liang-chi's protective shell. He walked to the bed and took out a folding knife, his eyes numb and silent. "Scratching down is liberation, there is such a sound in my ear." He clenched the handle of the knife with his right hand, holding his breath. At this moment, the air seemed to stop flowing. The moonlight outside the window was pale, reflecting a slight brightness. Suddenly, he saw a long black hair quietly wrapped around the button on his sleeve. In an instant, there was no time to think. The girl's stunning and vivid face replaced those terrifying thoughts and completely occupied her brain. Her heart jumped back and forth, her hand loosened, and the knife fell to the ground with a loud sound. Liang-chi collapsed onto the chair, his brows like a dark cloud that couldn't be dissolved, slowly exhaling a mouthful of turbid air. I don't know how long he had been empty and dejected, but he opened the worn-out drawer and found a delicate silver chain lying inside a sandalwood box. Under the faint moonlight, it shimmered with stars, and on top of it stood a silver butterfly flapping its wings, lifelike. Beautiful and agile, just like her. "This is not a bracelet, it's her anklet." The young man vigorously wiped the bleeding wound with paper, feeling no pain at all. He was afraid of dirtying her things in his hand, so he carefully took off his hair intact from the button and placed it precious together with the ankle chain in the box. Locked the drawer. He leaned against the chair, looked up and closed his eyes, and the room was silent. No matter how lonely and hopeless the world is, it can still breathe a glimmer of vitality. Because he had seen her smile in the heavy and difficult black and white life. The secret of being humble may never be known by anyone. What moved the girl even earlier than the first sight was that she looked up at the moon on the second floor, and he looked up at her in the crowd. The bustling Nanjing district is bustling with bright lights, and there is an old-fashioned residential area surrounded by a green isolation belt next to the Beha Grand Theater. It is nestled in the hustle and bustle but not out of sync. Instead, it takes a rare and tranquil place that is luxurious and comfortable. This winding long alley is called Zhongtang Lane. It has been around for a long time, with brick walls, tile courtyards, and stone slabs. It has an ancient charm and was declared for preservation during the development and demolition. As a local cultural protection unit, the project was assigned to Meng Group, and has been repaired several times in recent years. The most eye-catching and unique three-story Chinese-style villa is the Meng Cheng family. It's not that it exudes grandeur, but rather that Meng Zhixing is passionate about tinkering with various exotic flowers and plants. The fence and entrance are surrounded by colorful elements, much like the entrance to the secret forest fairyland in a movie. Meng Cheng carried half of the leftover stir-fried yogurt into the house to change his shoes. The busy man in the kitchen heard the commotion at the entrance and walked out with a spoon in hand. Meng Zhixing devoted himself wholeheartedly to his family business when he was young. He got married and had children a little later, and now he is over 50 years old. However, he usually cultivates himself and self-disciplined, with a handsome face and a tall and robust figure. However, at this moment, he wears a new floral apron that conflicts with his temperament. "Old Meng, pink and delicate, how old are you now?" amused Meng Cheng. Meng Zhixing smiled warmly and asked in response, "Isn't Dad always 18 in your heart?" Meng Cheng obediently gave a thumbs up. As she approached, Meng Zhixing took a quick sniff and, "Hey," said, "why is the smell of tobacco and alcohol on your body stronger than when I come back from socializing?" The girl mischievously stuck out her tongue and pointed behind him, "Your pot is smoking." Meng Zhixing exclaimed, "Ouch," twice and quickly turned back to the kitchen. Upon seeing that he had been deceived, the door on the second floor had already closed when he came out again. "Hurry up and take a shower to eat noodles." End of this chapter. Chapter 5. He seems to hurt the moon. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. He seems to hurt the moon. Every year on her birthday, Old Meng would make a bowl of egg noodles for her. From the beginning, egg noodles were equally flavored and tasteless, to later becoming proficient in cooking, it became a common practice between father and daughter. Therefore, Meng Cheng didn't order a few bites of rice at the gathering. After taking a shower, Meng Cheng changed into a pajama dress, with a slender and soft body, a thin neck and shoulders, straight and long legs, and hair blowing half dry and scattered. He had a delicate melon seed face with a big palm, and his skin, soaked in water mist, was so tender that it seemed to be able to squeeze out water. His black and shiny eyebrows and eyes were even more intense and colorful. She opened the chair and sat down at the dining table. Egg noodles were steaming hot and fragrant. She took a sip and praised them sincerely, "Sure, Lao Meng. Egg noodles have become a 5-star chef." "What does this mean?" "It means that as long as you work hard, there will be progress. The reason why you can't see progress is because you haven't worked hard enough, just like you're learning." "Old Meng, listen." "What's wrong?" "Oh, it's nothing, I just didn't know whose monk was reciting scriptures." Knowing that she didn't like to listen to chatting and studying, Old Meng talked about his only love. "Back then, your mother was a golden flower in the Beha Theater. The man who chased her went to sea, and countless people sent flowers, cars, and houses, as well as those who directly gave diamond rings. But your mother felt that they were hypocritical and played for a while, only me. Only you, taking a different approach, made a bowl of plain soup and egg noodles for my mother, which immediately moved her to tears. Meng Cheng listened to this story at least 1,000 times, skillfully following it down and biting the surface. Old Meng, it's not that I doubt your personality charm. With your culinary skills 20 years ago, are you sure my mother cried because she was moved? Meng Zhixing. He waved his hand and said, the process is not important, anyway the effect is significant. After finishing the noodles, your mother will remember me. Meng Cheng. After finishing the noodles, the father and daughter sat on the sofa watching a variety show. Meng Cheng leaned against his father's shoulder, his attention completely absent from the TV, his mind wandering. After hesitating for a moment, she decided to confess, Dad, I met my crush tonight. After a pause, she asked again, do you know what crush means? Meng Zhixing wore a small case expression and said, as a boy with a heart, your father and I are also middle-aged surfing experts. We maintain a proactive attitude towards the internet and strive not to be left out. Meng Cheng chuckled and then spoke in a somewhat regretful tone, but I don't know if I'll ever meet him again in the future. We will meet again if we have fate. Do you agree to me dating? When did you hear what I said? Old Meng looked relieved. Not bad, you will now seek my opinion. Meng Cheng choked. Her nickname is Xuexue, but she was not obedient at all since childhood. She played with the girl's Barbie doll, and she also played with the boys' house tiles. In addition, Meng Zhixing was busy with work and often wasn't at home. Even if she tried to be with her, she couldn't help but neglect the care. She became independent early and indulged in the wild. Later on, as I grew older, I didn't go to school well and was pampered in the palm of my hand, which made me feel at ease. Once, old Meng went to pick her up from school and saw her chatting and laughing in the midst of a group of boys, lazily holding her arms and holding an unlit slender cigarette between her fingers, exuding a Hong Kong vibe. To be honest, as an old man at the time, he almost couldn't resist going over and handing her a fire. If you can catch up, it's just your person, old Meng said with a broad mind and a smile. If you can't catch up, no one can do anything. No matter how capable I am, I can't force you to snatch a young man. Meng Cheng. Old Meng suddenly became interested and said, but I can teach you some unique experience. Meng Cheng shook his head in disgust and refused. Forget it, I don't want a bowl of noodles to scare my future boyfriend away from crying. Meng Zhixing. Meng Zhixing is usually very busy with his work. The family business in the capital and the new enterprises and large factories in Beihai are harmonious and coordinated on both sides. If necessary, he also has to go on business trips abroad. There are usually 2 to 3 months a year on the way to catch up, but he has never missed Meng Cheng's birthday. The father and daughter talked until very late and were about to go back to bed. Meng Zhixing took out a velvet square box. Didn't it say that the anklet fell off when we went out with friends last time? I ordered an identical one for you again. Meng Cheng really likes that ankle chain and has become accustomed to wearing it. Meng Zhixing wrapped the butterfly silver chain around her slender and fair right ankle, where there was a small tattoo and several red lines outlining the outline of the little fox. Meng Cheng's pain nerves are very sensitive, so she is very afraid of pain. However, she couldn't bear it and really wanted to tattoo during that time. Meng Zhixing accompanied her to tattoo painlessly. On his wrist, there was a string of uppercase English letters. The abbreviations of Meng Cheng and her mother's names. Dad. Meng Cheng looked at him and slapped his long eyelashes, his expression suddenly becoming serious and careful. Do you blame me for loving my mother so much? Blame me. For not being able to safely come down from the production stage. She would ask this question every year on this day, and Meng Zhixing would not tire of it. The answer remained consistent, gently touching her head and saying, how could you be so naughty? You are the treasure that my mother fought her life to save, a unique gift from heaven. Dad loves you very much, and so does Mom. Meng Cheng's eyes flickered with pearls, and he leaned over to hug his father. Do you think Dad is very good? Meng Cheng nodded and said, So tomorrow, honestly go to school to attend classes for me. I was absent for a week right after school started, and the teacher's phone number went to the company. Are you going to rebel? Meng Cheng. The art style was emotional in just 1 second, and Lao Meng began to explain in a verbose manner that he should not cause trouble in school and should work harder in high school. Meng Cheng. Dad, a beautiful young man who is always 18 years old wouldn't be so nagging. Meng Zhixing. Meng Cheng lay in bed for a long time that day before falling asleep. After thinking about my mother, I recalled the cold and serene face of the young man, his deep and indifferent gaze, and his lonely figure. How to depict him? Just like the injured moon she saw tonight. Cold and pure, incomplete and broken, it is an extremely beautiful endangered breach of the embankment. The next Monday. Xiang Zhao waited early in the morning at Meng Cheng's doorstep, wearing the black circles under his eyes that made him feel inferior when he saw the 2 giant pandas. The first thing he said when he met was, "What does brother.in.law really look like?" Meng Cheng. After returning home from last night's gathering, Song Xinyuan threw a sentence in the 4 Heavenly Kings group. Meng Cheng fell in love with a boy at first sight on the snack street. With a trembling heart, Xiang Zhao sang a solo performance alone and yelled at the group message to 99+, but no one replied. He was so curious that he stayed up all night. Meng Cheng was worried about where to find someone, and didn't have the heart to talk to him. He shamelessly rubbed his food and car, chattering incessantly like a rooster in heat all the way. The 3 of them grew up together in Zhongtang Lane and went to school together. Meng Cheng was 2 years older than them. Later, Gao Wenba's mother was promoted to hospital director, and he moved with his family to the vicinity of the central hospital. Ruihua is known for being lax in his studies, and day students who don't attend morning classes on Mondays are solely conscious. It is obvious that Meng Cheng doesn't have this passion for learning. The 2 of them stepped on the preparation bell for the first class and entered the class through the back door. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Heaven helps her get away from singles. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Heaven helps her get away from singles. Mingyuan building has 4 floors and class 20. Perhaps it's because we only got along for a week in the new semester, and we haven't gotten to know each other yet. The class isn't so noisy, and in the second to last row, Gao Wenba is chatting with the girl at the back table while eating steamed buns. I went to Nyo Pai. From 2nd grade in elementary school to now, if you had a romantic relationship with your partner earlier, you could have gone back to ancient times and said hello to Pangu and Yuwa. Gaozi. Don't be afraid, little sister. His language art has always been awe-inspiring, just get used to it, Xiang Zhao interjected as he skipped an elderly disco dance as he chatted. He didn't forget to pull open the chair next to Gao Ci and rubbed it with his sleeve. Sister, this is the seat that Bo Zi and I selected for you during the seat adjustment. No one has been sitting for a week and it's been dusty, he said. Even when entering the class through the back door, Meng Cheng's arrival caused a considerable sensation. Leaving aside her face for now, let's talk about her attire. She is dressed in a tight-waisted short top, with a small V-neck cut at the chest, high-waisted straight-leg pants, paired with a silver metal leg chain. Her black hair is tied into a beautiful high ponytail, and her hair is scattered and furry on the forehead. She is dressed in a dark and casual style, cool and unrestrained. In addition, her alluring appearance, which cannot be ignored, doesn't seem like she's coming to school. It's like she's coming to trouble the teacher in charge of appearance in the school's political and educational department. The ready-made topic of promoting communication in the new class has arrived, and for a moment, discussions have sprung up like mushrooms after rain. There are rumors about her appearance, family background, and the heretical rumors that have been rumored about her. Meng Cheng remained calm and composed, ignoring these mixed gazes. However, after sitting down, the scorching gaze closest to her couldn't be ignored. She turned her head to look at her desk mate. Gao Porcelain's blush inexplicably. Shit, mad, you look like the air on Mount Everest. Meng Cheng. So beautiful that I can't breathe. Meng Cheng raised his eyebrows slightly and smiled generously. Okay, I'll pack enough oxygen cylinders for the next year. My name is Gao Ci. Farewell. Gao Ci shrugged and chuckled casually. You can call it that, it just adds a touch of Shaanxi flavor. Meng Cheng chuckled and said, Meng Cheng. Before Gao Wenbo finished eating the steamed buns, he was copying his homework and putting down his backpack to Zhao. He turned his head to look at the empty single seat in the last row of corners, then glanced at his watch and said, Oh, my classmate, he hasn't come yet. Do you think you are cheap? People don't care about you. Tomorrow I will spend a lot of money to buy a piece of marble and set up a gilded dog-licking memorial archway for you. Xiang Zhao. He drooped his head and looked like an unpopular little daughter. In law guarding an empty room alone. The class bell rang, the math teacher walked in, and the chatter in the class gradually quieted down. The new textbooks were neatly arranged in the desk pocket, and Meng Cheng was completely unfamiliar with his things. After searching for a long time, he found out that he had some shortcomings in Mathematics Compulsory 1. She thought for a moment, and coincidentally, her gaze tilted forward. Without hesitation, she leaned forward and skillfully removed the pen that was dancing in Gao Wenbo's hand. Confiscate it, she said. Gao Wenbo. Robbery behavior. The teacher continued with the new chapter on functions from the previous lesson, while Meng Cheng opened his book and glanced at the first page of the table of contents. Ah, the radiance of knowledge is so dazzling. It immediately hurt her eyes and brain cells, and she needs to rest first to make up for it. I casually lifted the hanging tail of my hair to my back, closed my book, and just as I was about to lie down, a faint and cold voice of a boy suddenly sounded from the back door 2 or 3 meters away. Report the sound quality of the youth is slightly heavy, like the melting cold ice and snow on a high mountain, and the frost and rime adhering to the planted wood. It is clean and pure, but without temperature or fluctuation, making people listen to a piercing coolness brushing their faces. The two simple words lightly brushed over his ear and turned into a small electric current that penetrated his ear canal, causing Meng Cheng's body to stiffen suddenly. She was momentarily stunned and didn't turn her head, but in an instant, a facial contour matched her mind, cold and distinct, deeply imprinted in her heart. What does it mean to have nowhere to find a broken iron shoe, and to get it without any effort? Heaven helped her get rid of singlehood. The teacher, who had just spoken 2 sentences, stopped and looked up at the tall and thin boy at the back door. As if remembering something, he frowned slightly and spoke in a slightly displeased tone. If I remember correctly, it was you who was late for my class last time. How long has it been since the start of school? What's going on? What's your name? Everyone in the class, without exception, turned their heads and looked back. The boiling discussion gradually revived, and the formation was no less than when Meng Cheng came in just now. However, the various words couldn't hear anything specific. When it comes to these two people, they haven't been here for a week and are very arrogant. Apart from being late and shouting reports, they hardly speak for a week, and they are closed off and eccentric. Coupled with people deliberately paying attention to and interpreting the half-true and half-false stories behind them, they can truly be called the top big shots on the topic list of class 20 and even grade. The difference is that their gaze towards the backward is more complex, with gossiping, disdainful, pitiful, and appreciative of their excellent appearance. Under this appreciation, there is a layer of regret that he is not worthy, and wastes his divine beauty. These gazes were intangible but more tangible than tangible. He Liang took all the photos and habitually silently endured them, feeling numb. He lowered his eyes, expressionless, with a loose black old backpack hanging from his thin shoulder. After a moment of silence, he only said, "Sorry teacher, I won't do it next time." The teacher didn't want to delay class either, so he scolded, "Let's not do it again. Hurry up and get back to your seat." Watching the boy walk in and sit in a slightly special single seat by the window at the bottom of the last row, the teacher instinctively furrowed his brow and then shook his head lightly. Sometimes planting seeds of prejudice in the heart, or simply denying someone, is really that simple. And every indifferent colored gaze falls lightly like straw, truly hitting a person but weighing 1,000 pounds. All right. Quiet. Let's continue with this example question. As the class continued, the gaze that fell on him gradually withdrew, except for Yu Guangli's most intense presence that remained stationary. He Liangqi paused as he pulled out his textbook and awkwardly tilted his head slightly. Embrace Meng Cheng's naked and straightforward gaze, with excited anticipation. There is no table next to him, and there is a gap of about 2 aisles between them. He Liangqi's heart suddenly trembled uncontrollably, squeezing a corner of the page tightly. No one has seen him so innocently. Never. In less than 2 seconds of staring at each other, the boy turned his head. Meng Cheng didn't even have the chance to move his lips and open his mouth to say a word. It seemed that he had entered a state of listening to the class, and his reaction was so calm that Meng Cheng felt that he didn't remember her at all. It is inevitable that there will be some small disappointment. In the next class, Meng Cheng was either staring at people or marveling at the wonder of fate. She didn't take any other actions. Although she didn't love learning, she still maintained a good consciousness of not disturbing others and not disturbing classroom order. Gaozi was playing with her phone in her desk pocket and looked up several times to inspect the situation. She found that the person next to her twisted their head, stretched their neck to look at her, and finally couldn't help but poke her and ask, "Why do you keep staring at him?" Meng Cheng said, "Look at him, he doesn't feel sleepy. A handsome guy is no more interesting than math." Gao Ci was speechless. Not only did she not feel drowsy, but she also looked energetic and her heart was pounding. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Leaving People Behind the Mouth. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Leaving people behind the mouth. The conversation between the two did not deliberately lower their voices, and the girl's clear and smiling voice naturally fell into her ears. The tip of the boy's pen, which was hanging down, quietly froze, and a destructive ink dot appeared between the lines of the neatly and beautifully printed words. Meng Cheng became more and more anxious, but the teacher had to procrastinate and finally got the order to finish class. Before she could figure out how to politely and elegantly strike up a conversation, she watched as the boy was called out by another teacher. She left her seat and followed to the back door, blatantly listening to the corner of the wall. Gao Ci was puzzled and gave her a puzzled glance. Why is Meng Cheng so devoted to this solitary monster? Isn't it that you're interested in seeing the color? It was Yue, the homeroom teacher of class 20, who called out He Liangqi. She was a young woman under 30 years old, exuding a strong scholarly atmosphere of teaching Chinese. She had a moderate intellect and was as elegant as a chrysanthemum. Just a week after the start of the school year, 2 teachers had already reported their lateness to her. She took the opportunity to inquire before class, and her approach was not aggressive. Considering that there was a reason behind the situation, her questioning language was kind and appropriate. Faced with such a beautiful and gentle teacher, what cannot be opened up? However, the young man stood with his straight back, hands down, eyelids low, lips pursed, and remained silent. The dense black straight eyelashes covered the inside and blocked the outside, not giving anyone a chance to approach him. The caregiver started working today, so he no longer has to worry about Su Huilan's life and daily life. Being late will never happen in the future. He didn't say the reason, but made the same promise. Sorry teacher, we won't do it next time. Upon hearing this, Yue didn't make things difficult for him anymore. He smiled and said, "Teacher, believe you, go back. If you have any difficulties, remember to tell me in a timely manner." He Liang-chi remained silent and turned back to work, only to be stopped in the next moment. A delicate and beautiful figure leaped into his eyes, and unexpectedly, he pounced on the sweet orange fragrance on the girl's body. He secretly tightened his palm and didn't see her move for a long time. He had to slowly lift his eyelids, and the bright smile on the girl's face immediately reflected in his dull eyes, adding a bright color. Meng Cheng tried to greet him and said, "What a coincidence." The school uniform was issued last week, and Meng Cheng's was still wrapped in a packaging bag and stuffed into the table without anyone noticing. Looking around, he was the only one in the class wearing it properly. Summer white short sleeves, black long pants, ordinary silhouette supported by the superior figure of the youth, with clear and sharp lines, clean and cool temperament, far away from people thousands of miles away. Meng Cheng's gaze locked on the square school sign on his chest, and his rosy lips moved as he whispered his name. He, Liang-chi, hiss. Why does it seem like I've heard of it before? This doubt just popped up, and a memory flashed in my mind. Isn't it that stir-fried yogurt machine? She should have used the wrong adjective. It's not a good coincidence. It's a coincidence that his mother went downstairs to open the door for Xiao. Meng Cheng was slightly stunned, and his gaze returned to his face. The young man's skin was extremely white, almost close to the cold and translucent texture of sheepskin jade, highlighting the crimson-red color on his lips. His hair was slightly longer on his forehead, and several strands were intertwined, piercing his eyelids. In response to his indifferent face, his cold and narrow phoenix eyes were pale in color, like a rare and beautiful translucent amber, containing a hint of lifeless coldness and distance. She caught her attention from the gravity in his eyes and saw him silent, trying to make him remember. "We met last night. On the snack street, you gave me a tug." He Liang-chi still remained silent. He was one head higher than her, with a slanted gaze and a faint and light demeanor, like the most tasteless cold white opening. Looking straight at him for a moment, he unconsciously lowered his eyelids first. Unexpectedly, his gaze slipped towards the exquisite design of the V-neck of the girl's shirt. After 2 seconds, his snowy skin flickered in his field of vision. He panicked, quickly closed his eyes, and instinctively took a step back. Meng Cheng watched as he not only didn't respond, but also took a serious step back and said, "Is she cannibalistic?" Over there, Xiang Zhao, who had slept for most of the class, suddenly jumped up from his dream and said, "Grab the grass. 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 Wipe, I'm so convinced that you are here." Gao Wenbo was so scared that he almost went on strike and straightened the table. "Why? You were bitten by a zombie in his mother dream." Xiang Zhao glared. "No, it's his mother worse than a zombie." His expression gradually changed to a ghostly surprise. "I dreamt. Ching Jie said she wasn't interested in his classmate 1 second ago, but the next second she forcefully arched and kissed him in front of the whole class. TSK, that kiss was like a sinkhole purple golden hammer. It's so intense. It's even more intense than a plant battle zombie." Gao Wenbo. The two of them stared at each other and remained silent for a few seconds, then turned their heads tacitly to find that there was no one in their respective positions. They then scanned around tacitly before finally fixing their gaze on the back door. When did the two of them hook up? Gao Wenbo asked seriously, "Plants versus zombies." "No, where is the location of that strong kiss?" "It's right there," Xiang Zhao replied solemnly. The two fell into a contemplation of doubting life. Before he could even ponder a result, the next second saw Meng Zombie take a fierce step forward, approaching the weak and helpless Hijiji. It was unclear for a moment whether it was a dream or reality, and the two brothers took a deep breath in sync. At the critical moment, in order to prevent Ching Jie's momentary infatuation that led to an irreversible mistake, Xiang Zhao didn't even think about it and screamed heartily, "No! Qingjie!" Gao Wenbo stood up suddenly and said, "Leave someone behind." These two loud and powerful high-pitched voices with great potential for screaming chicken development shook the originally noisy whole class in an instant. Meng Cheng slowly turned his head to look at them and said, The crowd was even more puzzled and turned their gaze to the scene of the incident. The scene in the class was strangely still, but Liangqi remained calm and bypassed Meng Cheng back to his seat, cutting himself off from everything else around him. Yue, who was debugging the courseware on the podium, was also confused by the sudden movement for 2 seconds. Then he coughed and reminded, "It's almost time for class, everyone hurry back to their seats." The teacher spoke, and there were classmates walking back and forth in the hallway. Meng Cheng hooked his foot off the chair and sat down. Gao Wenbo and Xiang Zhao were like two ground squirrels who had been hit back into their holes with a hammer, shrinking their heads and turning to approach. The little gaze in Xiang Zhao's eyes was filled with rare wisdom, and he asked, "Sister Cheng, be honest and lenient. What were you going to do to he just now?" Meng Cheng didn't understand the situation and was confused. "What are you not doing?" "I just want to get to know you," he said. Seeing their reaction, she frowned and said, "But it's you too, what are you doing all this time?" "Oh, it's like this." Gao Wenbo repeated Xiang Zhao's dream. Meng Cheng's mouth twitched. "I suggest that you two take some time to go back to the mental hospital for a check-up, or go to the city center hospital. There happens to be an aunt present, and we will arrange a full course of brain science package for you." Xiang Zhao was not convinced and said, "It's not that we're sick, Sister Cheng. It's like something you can do." Gao Wenbo nodded in agreement and said, "Yes, it completely fits your style, just like an 80-year-old lady dancing square dance, you can never guess where to go next." Meng Cheng. I his mother. Thank you both. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Self-Introduction. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8 Self-Introduction. The lively Gao Ci beside couldn't help but laugh and tremble. Xiang Zhao wanted to say something more when Gao Ci, with her sharp eyes, suddenly nudged Meng Cheng with her elbow, suppressing her smile and saying through her teeth, "Teacher, you're here." Upon hearing the words, the two ground squirrels quickly turned their heads and sat upright, as if nothing had happened. Meng Cheng raised his eyes and, as expected, met the gaze of Yue, who was looking around. Seeing her receiving the signal, Yue first smiled gently and then said, "Our class has only been fully seated until now. Everyone has already introduced themselves at last week's opening class meeting, Meng Cheng, only you are missing." Meng Cheng. She was a bit surprised, but when she realized it, she didn't feel any self-conscious. She stood up and said succinctly, "Hello everyone, my name is Meng Cheng." Yue waited for a moment and said, "It's gone. Female, 17 years old. Do you have any hobbies or strengths?" Meng Cheng thought for a moment and said truthfully, "I know everything except for studying." Yue. The class was whispering and there was a little restlessness and suppressed laughter. Yue gestured for everyone to be quiet and continued to guide, so. At the class meeting, everyone talked about why they chose Ruehua and their ideals. "Can you also talk about it?" Meng Cheng didn't need to think about the previous question and blurted out, "Come to Ruehua, because other schools can't pass." As for ideals, Meng Cheng had never considered this before. In her spare time, she caught a glimpse of the corner of her school uniform. She turned her head to look at the gloomy young man standing by the window, quietly reading a book. Then, with a bright smile, she didn't feel anything inappropriate and said, "Then. Let's take off before the end of this semester." Yue. Class. Gaozi widened her eyes and admired her nonsensical speech from an upward perspective, to the point where she couldn't help but want to kowtow to the female warrior Duang Duang on the spot. Sisters, you are introducing yourself in a very new way. Everyone quietly turned around, their eyes curious and surprised, once again exploring this dazzling girl who is bold in all aspects. This sister really doesn't treat them as outsiders, she dares to say anything outside. Courage is unparalleled and there is no one who can surpass Max. Xiang Zhao and Gao Wenba looked at each other calmly. Qing Jie understands the word ideal. In the middle of the first group, a girl with short hair whispered to her desk mate, her eyes full of envy. Jiafu, do you think this girl is so cool? Yi Jiafu quickly covered the content on the draft paper with her arm, nodded perfunctorily, but a hint of disdain flashed in her eyes. She thought to herself, isn't it just that she likes to stand out wherever she goes, and loves to stand out? Unfortunately, we were assigned to the same class as her. On the covered draft paper, a large cross was drawn on Meng Cheng's name. At noon, the first cafeteria was crowded with people. He Liangqi simply made 2 vegetarian rice dishes and found a secluded and quiet corner. Just as she put down the plate, a fragrant breeze blew up beside her. The girl sat down across from him, looking up at him with a curved smile and saying, "Hey, let's have lunch together." Meng Cheng's intuition was that he did not fail to recognize her, but simply did not want to talk to anyone. "It's okay, just familiarize yourself with it." He Liangqi avoided her gaze, furrowed his brows, pursed his lips, and didn't say anything. He picked up his plate and was about to leave, but in the blink of an eye, he was suddenly pushed down by someone's shoulder and blocked his way out. With a sunny smile and a silly scolding, he said, I sincerely invite you to join a team to cook." He Liangqi said, This happened to be a table for 4, and Gao Wenba sat down next to Meng Cheng and said, "Come on, brother. Don't be polite, let's show off our food and double the fragrance together." Seeing that there were almost no vacant seats in the cafeteria, he didn't insist on leaving anymore. He simply ignored the presence of the 3 and silently began to eat silently. Meng Cheng followed him and ate the same food. Xiang Zhao and Gao Wenba ate wonton. The boy eats quietly and subtly, without making any extra noise, but the speed is not slow, as if there is a deliberate tendency to accelerate. The soft and smooth black short hair drooped in front of his forehead with a downward movement. At noon, the scorching sun was shining, and the bright orange light passed through his hair, fainting on him. Finally, it added some vitality and warmed the cold air around him. "You look quite obedient like this." Meng Cheng held his cheek with one hand, unconsciously curling the corners of his lips. The girl's intentions were not concealed, all written in her eyes, and the food on the plate remained untouched. Perhaps the gaze was too hot, and He Liangqi's chewing movements slowed down. He lifted his eyes and a shallow fold formed on his thin eyelids. As her gaze met, her lips curved wider and she said, "Why don't you eat some meat? The dishes you ordered are like yours, looking at someone with a clear mind and few desires." He Liangqi said, "Wonton duo." He Liangqi quickly lowered his eyes and opened his lips lightly, "Don't look at me, eat." It can be considered as saying something, it's not easy. Meng Cheng obediently picked up a green vegetable and put it into his mouth, but his eyes still didn't move away from him. After a while, she suddenly spoke with a serious expression, her fox eyes half-curved and seductive. In order to achieve my ideals as soon as possible, I want to develop a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship with you." He Liangqi said, Gao Wenba shook his spoon and said, "WTF?" To Wonton, who looked at his mouth, he vomited back, "What are you doing?" Meng Cheng paid no attention to the frowning, eye-teasing, and coughing of the two, looking eagerly at He Liangqi. The result is that they scared away before finishing their meal. Meng Zhiqiu, the girl with a straight ball, stared at the hasty back of the young man who had fled in confusion. She blinked her eyes in confusion and asked the two people who were also stunned and petrified in the same spot, "Am I too direct?" Gao Wenbo sighed from the bottom of his heart, "Sister Cheng, what's so direct about you? Even you Lao and Cupid have to get up from bed in the middle of the night to work overtime, and I'll give you a 666 deduction when I pick up my phone." Meng Cheng touched the tip of his nose and said, "Is it so exaggerated? I think I'm already tactful enough." Gao Wenbo. Do you have any misunderstandings about the Chinese word euphemism? He took out his phone and typed with a click, then handed the interface to Meng Cheng. Meng Cheng lowered his eyes and scanned. Baidu Baiki. Euphemism. It means not speaking directly about something, deliberately speaking in a subtle and tactful manner. Meng Cheng. I would like to call you the #1 hero in the Milky Way's pursuit of husbands, Gao Wenbo pondered with a deep expression. They play straight balls step by step, with a skilled player who plays hard to get, winning step by step. Good guy, when they come up to you, they just carry a mortar and make a sudden thrust, which is not surprising. Meng Cheng seemed to understand. Besides, as you said, if you're like he, who is relatively reserved, maybe you haven't remembered your name yet. So. Should I introduce myself again just now? Gao Wenbo. Gone. That's not the point. The key is not to act too hastily. Who comes up and says he wants to deal with others? Xiang Zhao listened to their conversation, but before turning around, he became even more confused. "Qingjie, didn't you just want to get to know him?" "Yeah, let's get to know him on the premise of dating." Meng Cheng tilted his head and said, "Is there any problem?" Xiang Zhao. "Damn it. You said last night you weren't interested in him." Meng Cheng tisked and said, "So now not only my face, but also my whole body is hurting from the beating." Xiang Zhao. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Just need to get close to him. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Just need to get close to him. That's not right. Stunned for a moment, Xiang Zhao suddenly remembered something and exclaimed in disbelief, "This. The last brother.in.law hasn't been found yet. It wasn't long before you moved on to another relationship." Meng Cheng was too lazy to explain and focused on eating. Uncle and aunt have made glorious achievements in scientific research and serving the country throughout their lives. The only thing they can't do is give birth to a bug like you. Gao Wenbo was really worried about his intelligence, and I wonder why your head, which accounts for 99% of your weight, has no place to be used. Can't you imagine that they might be the same person? Xiang Zhao. This is so coincidental. He muttered like a big golden-haired man with drooping ears, "Then my parents' wisdom has been devoted to the country's aerospace industry, and there wasn't enough of them to make me. Besides, it would be great if I could be born amidst their busy schedule." Meng Cheng smiled and teased him, "So we have always been quite tolerant of your foolishness." Xiang Zhao. Halfway through the meal, Xiang Zhao sorted out the matter and began to babble again, "Sister Cheng, I think you and he are actually quite compatible." Meng Cheng looked up at him and raised his eyebrows with interest, waiting for the next text. Xiang Zhao said with a nose and eyes, "Look, in terms of appearance, the hot fairy and pretty Tang monk are so taboo, stimulating, and have a strong sense of CP. In terms of personality, one is bold and the other is introverted, which complements each other perfectly. Besides, you two are the oldest in our class. When it comes to communication, there is no generation gap, it's even more perfect than a happy and heavenly fairy match." Meng Cheng. That's perfect. It's a pity not to reward him with such a eloquent mouth. Xiang successfully convinced himself to become a CP fan, and then habitually sought the opinion of Gao Wenba, saying, "Am I right, Bo?" Gao Wenba often nodded in embarrassment and said, "That must be right." The international strategic analysis experts specially appointed by the United Nations are not as good as you. Xiang Zhao. He's praising people, right? Why does this sound so unpleasant? Upon careful consideration, Meng Cheng indeed extracted something valuable from his basket of nonsense and asked, "Is he about the same age as me? I'm almost 2 years older than you." Meng Cheng's eyebrows and tail jumped, his expression clearly surprised. Anticipating what she would ask next, Xiang Zhao poured beans out and said, "It seems like he dropped out of junior high school and came back to study several years later. When I was strolling around the office before, I heard you Marin talking to him. Oh, by the way, he's not a local and hasn't been here for long. Dropping out of school." Meng Cheng was taken aback and blurted out a question, "Why?" There are too many versions of this. That have been passed down, all sorts of them, but the real reason is probably only known to him. Speaking of these, I don't know what came to mind. I paused slightly towards Zhao, my eyebrows furrowed, and my face became inexplicably serious. I wanted to say something, but I didn't know how to say it. I sighed a few times and said, "The rumors related to he are quite rampant, not only in school, but also online. There are countless reports and all kinds of messy revelations." Gao Wenba continued his words, "Yes, he's lost all his underwear that was exposed by those media marketing accounts. His personal information and past experiences are like the willow catkins of spring, your girl's hair, spreading everywhere. Some shocking news, I don't know whether it's true or fabricated. The bombardment of these related gossip information is so much that even those who don't like to join in the hustle and bustle of the internet can explore the secrets of the disgraceful wealthy families. With the exception of Meng Cheng, as long as she doesn't take care of everything, even if it's under her nose, it won't catch her eye." Meng Cheng could feel from their words and reactions that the complicated disputes over He Liangqi were not so simple, and she could naturally guess that they were all some bad things. She had many doubts, but did not continue to ask further. She will gradually understand everything about him in the future, but not from other people, let alone through those false and unfounded online speculations. Just get close to him, that's enough. But if she doesn't ask, it doesn't mean that Xiang Zhao and Gao Wenba don't say anything. The two of them looked at each other on the table, kicked and kicked with their hooves under the table. In the final round, the stone, scissors, and cloth decided to speak out to Zhao, the unlucky candidate, Qingjie. That. Facing Meng Cheng's pitch-black eyes, he hesitated and hesitated for a long time, hesitating under Gao Wenba's urging signal. "Based on your relationship with He Jinming, it is still necessary for me to kindly remind him that he is." "Stop it." Meng Cheng didn't give him the chance to finish speaking. Her naturally rosy lips curved in a shallow arc, and her seductive eyes curled up with a cool chill. She spoke slowly, "What's the relationship between He Jinming and me? After finishing the ball, I said the wrong thing." Xiang Zhaomian revealed his obedience and quickly changed his mind, "No, you have nothing to do with him. It's his wishful thinking. The toad swan wants to eat toad meat." Meng Cheng. Gao Wenba. Xiang Zhao is good everywhere, but his cerebellum is not fully developed and his brain is completely undeveloped. I knew he was the one who said it. This matter is causing a stir. The scattered table not far away was partially covered by a pot of standing green plants, and the perspective of the four girls was just enough to capture the scene on the other side of the glass window. Yi Jiafu watched Meng Cheng leave with his plate, followed closely by Xiang Zhao and Gao Wenba, with his gaze almost following them wherever he passed. More precisely, he was following the girl who was shining every inch of her body. Her gentle face showed no obvious emotions, but her teeth were tightly biting the flesh on the inner wall of her mouth. "Why do they eat with that solitary monster? The girl sitting opposite Yi Jiafu was the one who raised the question. Feng Xiaodan was both surprised and puzzled. He Liangqi, who was so terrifying and dark, had someone willing to interact with him. Who knows? The three girls started chattering and discussing, and Yi Jiafu's eyes dimmed, her palms clenched tightly. She couldn't figure it out. How could Meng Cheng take the initiative to date that closed and silent monster? His gaze was still so unusual. Doesn't she know that he is the illegitimate child of the He family, and that he will compete for property with brother Jinming in the future? In his trance, a careful guess came from his ear. Do you think Meng Cheng has fallen in love with He Liangqi? I think her gaze at him is very different. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone else fell silent. A hint of darkness swept through Yi Jiafu's eyes, and she was well disguised under her delicate and harmless pure appearance. She spoke up at the right time. Maybe so, after all, only Meng Cheng dared to approach someone like him. She seemed to understand Meng Cheng's tone very well, and her desk mate Lin Yue was already very fond of cool girl. She was curious and asked, Jiafu, do you know Meng Cheng? Yi Jiafu paused for a few seconds and nodded. I used to be a good friend, but now I don't talk much anymore. Ah. Why? They perked up their ears, but saw Yi Jiafu hesitating for a while. Oh, forget it, it's all over now, don't mention it. Halfway through, are you polite? End of this chapter. Chapter 10. The Meng Family in the Capital. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. The Meng Family in the Capital. Yi Jiafu's hesitant tone, combined with a hint of friendship-breaking drama on her face, led the other three who smelled the thick gossip factor to become even more curious. Just like watching the key plot of a TV drama skip an advertisement, I have an eager little paw scratching in my heart, especially Feng Xiaodan and Joey on the opposite side, taking turns to say good things to her. Alright, I'll tell you all. Yi Jiafu reluctantly compromised. Meng Cheng and I were both in Nanchuan Middle School, and our families were quite close. We gradually got to know each other through mutual friends, but later we got to know each other. Actually, there wasn't any major conflict, just Meng Cheng never likes to play with girls, and most of the time she spends time with boys. Why? What's wrong with the girl? Feng Xiaodan frowned upon hearing this, as if her identity as a girl had been offended. She only felt uncomfortable, but did not realize that she was being led by the nose. Yi Jiafu hesitated and whispered softly, I once accidentally heard her say to someone. We girls are in a state of intrigue and love to play tricks. She also suspected that I spoke ill of her behind my back in front of other male friends, stirred up discord, and had a few unpleasant moments afterwards. Now it's like a stranger. I feel like I'm always being targeted by her for no reason in that group. Yi Jiafu's lips curled slightly, as if suddenly remembering some uncomfortable memories, unable to control herself, her eyes turning red, as if she had suffered a great injustice. Her words also choked up as she said, that time she misunderstood me for touching her things. Before I could explain, she slapped me and didn't apologize after understanding the situation. Perhaps feeling incredulous about the actions she was recounting, the three girls were stunned until her shoulders trembled and tears were about to fall. Lin Yue next to her was the first to react and quickly handed a tissue to comfort them. What kind of person is this? Feng Xiaodan's anger overflowed through her words, completely substituting herself into Yi Jiafu's situation, as if she had been misunderstood and slapped. She even started hitting people and called it a conflict. This is called unilateral bullying. Isn't she a woman? Isn't her mother a woman? Why is she still so malicious towards girls? Joey also felt sorry for her. If you ask me, she just wants to constantly attract the attention of those boys. Isn't that the kind of person? On the surface, she looks like a brother to a boy, but in reality, she's ambiguous with everyone. She wants all the men to revolve around her. It must be your appearance that has caused her a sense of crisis, and she thinks that you have a soft personality and are easy to handle, deliberately causing trouble for you. It's really deceiving people too much. No, Meng Cheng is not as bad as you think. Did I say too much, feeling like I was slandering her behind her back? Yi Jiafu spoke in a regretful tone, slightly hanging her head and wiping away her tears. Joey patted her shoulder and said, Jiafu, don't blame yourself. This is not slander, it's telling the truth, so that we can see her true face early on. Hey! I suddenly remembered something. Fang Xiaodan exclaimed in surprise, do you remember the day when we finished cleaning and were chatting and having fun? There was a girl sleeping behind us, and you accidentally touched her with your arm. Then she scolded us hard. She is Meng Cheng. When Joey mentioned this, he held his breath and said, how could I not remember? I already recognized it as her. You don't know, she had a fierce face and a bad temper at the time. I didn't mean to apologize to her. And everyone was cleaning the new classroom, only she was lazily sleeping. Fang Xiaodan was angry and twisted her eyebrows together, putting down her chopsticks. It's too arrogant and domineering to act recklessly and bully others based on the strong background of her family, she said, let's keep our voices down. Lin Yue, who had not expressed any opinions, looked around and reminded weakly. The two righteous female heroes only realized at this moment that they seemed to be too excited, and they had already overcome their verbal addiction. Seeing many people around them looking over, their anger was extinguished, and they began to feel guilty and afraid that what they had just said would be overheard. What's even more frightening is that if it gets passed on to Meng Cheng's ears, Meng Cheng's family background is strong, to what extent? The wealthy Meng family in the capital may be unknown to everyone. If we compare the prestigious families and nobles of the capital to a pyramid, then the Meng family is a symbol of the elite class. The long and stable large family has been passed down from generation to generation, with a long history, talented people emerging, and both politics and commerce flourishing. Especially in the business world of the main camp, regardless of the changes in the situation, I remain firmly at the top, occupying absolute discourse power and authoritative position in the upper echelons of the capital. Meng Group is a typical and exemplary star leading enterprise in China, a multinational corporation, and is ranked high in any wealth value ranking both domestically and internationally. More than a decade ago, Meng Zhixing ascended to the throne and took over the main decision-making power of the Meng Group. As a result, the focus of the Meng family gradually shifted towards Behe City. Driven by a series of industries, not only did Behe's GDP soar like a rocket, but it also leapt to become a new first-tier city. It is obvious that the roots of the Meng family and the North Crane are not on the same horizontal line at all, and the Yi family can be considered a local wealthy businessman with great prestige. However, in front of the Meng family, they are completely insignificant, with the stark difference between the lake and the sea. Meng Cheng, who has such a family background, even if they can't stand it anymore, they can't afford to offend a single strand of their hair. When the attention around her dissipated, Joey poked and stirred the rice. The resentment of being scolded on the day of school began to surge back into her chest, but her voice unconsciously fell within the range of 4 people. Birds of a feather flock together, people flock together, and whoever attracts them is what attracts them. A psychologically dark illegitimate child and a 14-year-old murderer who has been sentenced to prison with a knife, she dares to join in. It seems that she is not a good person. Isn't there a few big characters clearly written on her face? Joey asked, what? No difference in seduction, accompanied by a sneer. It's not good to say that. Yi Jiafu said timidly. I'm not wrong, Fang Xiaodan shrugged nonchalantly, praising with a hint of attachment. Jiafu, you're much more beautiful than Meng Cheng, with outstanding grades and a wealthy family background. It's just that you're too simple and easily overwhelming. Joey. Yes, kindness without sharpness is weakness that is worthless. Don't think people in this world are so good and simple, otherwise one day they will be tricked and replaced by others. Yi Jiafu wore a vulnerable sheep character that had been successfully portrayed, and a false smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. She nodded gently and said, "I know, thank you." Feng Xiaodan said with a righteous smile, "Thank you. We will be good sisters in the future. We will stand by you and never let her bully you again." Yi Jiafu lowered her head, her eyes reflecting a dark light, revealing her true form. Under the gentle facade, there is a calculation city that does not match his age. Lin Yue, who rarely speaks, is like an outsider who silently listens to the whole process and looks at the lumped noodles in soup in front of her. It's hard to swallow. Inexplicably, it's a bit appetizing. It seems that a person's temperament is easily labeled as malicious in just a few words. Prejudice is firmly established. Clearly, even though they haven't really had contact with Meng Cheng yet. Based solely on some one-sided words. When harsh words burst out without thinking, something in a person's heart may accompany the burial, becoming a string puppet manipulated by resentment, with a blank body. Lin Yue will always remember when she turned her head and saw the dazzling eyebrows and eyes of the girl. Open and bright. Fearless and free-spirited. No one can compare. End of this chapter.